There is a particular kind of person who walks into a room already certain that nobody in it matters, not cruel about it, exactly, and not loud, just settled, the way a fact is settled. This is the slow story of a girl who arrived at her school believing exactly that, and of everything that happened to her afterward. Her name is Suzune Horikita, and on her first morning she takes a seat in the back row of Class D at Advanced Nurturing High School, a place that sits on its own grounds, sealed off from the outside world, where the students live on campus for 3 years and almost never leave. It is a strange, quiet sort of luxury. The shops are stocked with anything a student could want. The buildings are clean and new and enormous. Everything a person might need has already been thought of and provided, and the whole arrangement gives off the pleasant impression that someone somewhere is being very generous. She is 16 years old. She has long black hair that she keeps tied with a single pink ribbon, and eyes that seem to have been set permanently to a temperature just below polite. Her record before this school was close to flawless. Top grades since she was small, 3 full years of middle school without once being late and without once being absent. When her homeroom teacher later goes back through the numbers, it turns out that on the entrance examination Horikita placed 3rd out of every single first-year student in the school. Not 3rd in her class, 3rd in the entire year. And she has been sorted into Class D. To understand what that means to her, you have to understand what the school does with letters. The students are divided into 4 classes, A through D, and those letters are not a description of where you started. They are a running measurement of what the school currently thinks you are worth. Class A is the top. Class D is the bottom, and in the history of the place, no one has ever climbed from the bottom to the top. The letter is meant to be a verdict, and the verdict is meant to hold. Horikita looks at her letter and concludes, without any particular drama, that a mistake has been made. It is a reasonable conclusion, given her numbers. It is also, and this is the thing that will take her almost the entire story to understand, completely wrong. But she does not know that yet. What she knows is that she is going to Class A, that she is going to get there by herself, and that everyone sitting around her is an obstacle rather than a resource. The boy she happens to be seated next to is called Kiyotaka Ayanokoji. They speak at all only because of where the chairs are. He is quiet, unremarkable to look at, entirely without presence, the sort of student a teacher's eye slides across without stopping. He asks her, in the mild way he asks everything, whether she wants to be friends. She tells him no. She tells him more or less that friends are a weight, that people who need other people are people who have decided to be slower, and that she has no intention of being slowed down. She is not performing this, she means it completely. Kikyo Kushida tries too, and Kushida is very hard to refuse. She is bright and warm and genuinely likable, the girl who learns everyone's name in the first week and remembers it, the one who organizes things and includes people and smooths the edges of a room simply by being in it. She offers Horikita friendship in the open, cheerful way she offers it to everybody. Horikita declines that as well. Later, Ayanokoji arranges a small gathering at a cafe, a low-stakes thing, a few classmates and some coffee, and he does it specifically to get Horikita into a room with other human beings. She works out what he has done within about a minute of sitting down, and she stands up and walks out, not in a temper, simply the way you would leave a room you had entered by mistake. And the school watches all of this and says nothing and records it. Because there is a second explanation for her letter, and it is being offered to her almost constantly, by almost everyone in almost every scene, and she cannot hear it. Her homeroom teacher, Sae Chabashira, puts it about as plainly as a teacher can. Class D is where the school puts its defective students, not its stupid ones, its defective ones. Every student in that room has something the school has looked at and marked as a flaw, and the flaws are all different. Some of them are lazy. Some of them are violent. Some of them cannot sit still, or cannot stop talking, or cannot be trusted. Horikita's flaw is that she will not work with anybody. Ayanokoji asks her about it directly one evening, standing in the rain. He asks whether it has occurred to her that the coldness might be the reason, that the school might have measured her perfectly well, seen a student with excellent marks and no capacity whatsoever to function alongside another person, and filed her exactly where it meant to file her. She denies it immediately. And then she stands there in the rain, and she does not move for a while, and you can watch the thought arrive and settle somewhere she cannot reach it to throw it out. It is the first crack, and it is very small, and it will take a long time to widen. There is a reason she is like this, and the reason has a name and walks around the same campus. Her older brother is Manabu Horikita, a 3rd year, Class A, and the president of the student council. He is composed and severe and extremely capable, and the school treats him with something close to reverence. He is, in the most literal sense, the standard she measures herself against, and he has never once told her she has met it. Their reunion is not a reunion. He finds her early on and tells her to withdraw from the school, not to try harder, not to fix anything, to leave. His reasoning is that a sister sitting in the bottom class is a stain on the reputation he spent 3 years building, and that her presence there embarrasses him. She tells him she will reach Class A. He tells her she does not even understand what she is missing, which is a crueler thing to say than it first sounds, because it is true and because he will not tell her what it is. Then he grabs her and moves to strike her. Ayanokoji steps in. What follows is brief and very strange, because Ayanokoji does not fight back and does not need to. He simply is not where the blows are, over and over calmly until Manabu stops. And Manabu, who misses nothing, looks at this forgettable boy from the bottom class and remembers something. He remembers that on the entrance examination, one student turned in a score of exactly 50 points on every single subject. Not a high score, not a low score. The precise mathematical center, held perfectly across every paper, which is a far harder thing to do than simply doing well. He files that away, so does the story. What matters for Horikita, though, is the shape of the thing she is chasing. Much later, when she is exhausted enough to stop guarding herself, she says it out loud. She enrolled at this school for one reason. She came here to be recognized by her brother, not to be successful in the abstract, not to build a life, not even really to reach Class A for its own sake. Class A is simply the shape that recognition would have to take before he would grant it. Every cold thing she does, every offer of friendship she refuses, every classmate she dismisses as useless, runs back to a boy who told her to go home. And so the first month passes, and the school springs the trap it has been holding open since the opening ceremony. On the first morning, every student's account is credited with 100,000 points. Points are money here. 1 point is 1 yen, and they spend anywhere on campus, on anything, with no restrictions and no supervision. 100,000 of them arriving at once, in the hands of 16-year-olds who have just been told that this school provides everything, produces exactly the result you would expect. Class D spends it, cheerfully and thoroughly, clothes and food and games and whatever caught somebody's eye that week. They also, and this is the part that actually matters, behave the way people behave when they believe there is no scoreboard. They arrive late, they talk through lessons, they skip, they treat the classroom as a room they happen to be in rather than a thing they are being assessed on. Nobody has told them they are being assessed, nobody has told them anything at all, and that silence is deliberate. Because the real mechanism is this: each class holds a number called class points, and every class begins the year with 1,000. At the start of every month, each student receives private points equal to 100 times their class's class points. 1,000 class points multiplied by 100 is 100,000, which is why the money arrived. It was never an allowance, it was a readout. It was the school showing them, in a currency they would actually pay attention to, precisely how much it currently believed their class was worth. And every late arrival, and every conversation during a lesson, and every empty chair was quietly subtracting from it. The second month arrives and Class D receives nothing at all. 0. Their class points have been spent down to nothing, so the multiplication produces nothing, and the number on every screen in that room is a flat and unarguable 0. This is the moment the school becomes visible. Not the letters, not the speeches, but the machine underneath, which has been running the entire time and keeping perfect records while 39 people assumed nobody was counting. It is worth sitting for a moment with how cruel and how elegant that design is, because it explains the entire school. Nobody lied to them. Every rule was published somewhere. The money genuinely was theirs and they genuinely could spend it on anything, and no teacher ever told them it was free. The school simply declined to explain, and then waited, and let 39 16-year-olds reveal exactly what they would do with resources they did not understand and authority nobody was checking. And the result is a perfect portrait. The students who spent everything in the first week are now visible, so are the ones who saved without knowing why, so are the ones who noticed something was wrong and said nothing, and the ones who noticed and were ignored. A month of unsupervised behavior has produced a more accurate assessment of that class than any examination could have, and it cost the school nothing but silence. This is what the place actually is, underneath the shops and the clean buildings and the polite fiction of generosity. It is an instrument for measuring people, and its favorite technique is to give someone what they want and watch what they do with it. Horikita, who prides herself on seeing clearly, walked into it exactly as blindly as everybody else. She did not overspend, but she also did not work out what the money was, and she did not warn anyone, because warning anyone would have required her to be paying attention to a room full of people she had already decided were beneath her notice. Her contempt cost her the one piece of information that would have been most useful to her. The class reacts the way people react to a bill they did not know they were accruing. There is noise and blame and disbelief. Horikita reacts differently, and her reaction tells you exactly who she is at this stage of her life. She does not join the panic, and she does not comfort anybody. She looks at the situation, identifies the single most useful person in the room, and moves to acquire him. She buys Ayanokoji lunch. It is a small thing, deliberately small, and then she uses it. She points out that he owes her now, and she conscripts him into the project of getting her to Class A. It is not friendship, and she would be offended if you called it that. It is procurement. Her first instruction to him is to gather up the 3 loudest failures in the class for a study group. Ken Sudo, Kanji Ike, and Haruki Yamachi, 3 boys who are, at this point, doing very little except confirming the school's opinion of them. Getting them into a room is genuinely useful work, and Ayanokoji manages it. And then Horikita opens her mouth. She tells them what she thinks of them. She is precise about it, which makes it worse, and she is not wrong about any individual fact, which makes it worse again. Sudo, who has a temper and no patience for being looked down on, walks out. The study group collapses roughly as fast as it was assembled. She has just demonstrated her own defect in front of the only witness who was going to bother noticing, and she does not see it. As far as she is concerned, she stated the situation accurately, and they were too fragile to hear it. That is the whole trouble with her, really. She's almost never factually wrong and almost always practically useless, and she has no idea that those two things can coexist. The school, being the school, sends her the bill for that as well. The first midterm examinations arrive, and they arrive with a rule attached that nobody knew about. Anyone who scores below the class average fails, and anyone who fails is expelled, not suspended. Expelled, removed, gone. Sudo is comfortably in the danger zone, and Sudo is in the danger zone partly because the one study group that might have saved him ended with him walking out of a room. Chabashira then makes an offer. In the flat way she makes all her offers. A single point on the examination can be purchased. The price is 100,000 private points. Ayanokoji cannot cover it. Horikita pays half, 50,000 points, a genuinely enormous sum in a month when the class received nothing at all, spent to keep a boy in school whom she had, days earlier, informed of his own worthlessness. She insists it was self-interest. She says it clearly and more than once. Sudo is a physical asset. The class needs bodies. Losing a student damages the class further, therefore the expenditure was rational. Every word of that is defensible. It is also the first time she spends something real to keep a person, and she is at pains to explain that it does not mean anything, which is usually how you can tell that it does. Sudo stays. And then Sudo, almost immediately, causes a much larger problem. He is accused of beating 3 boys from Class C. The accusation is serious enough to end him, and the school's default position is not sympathetic to a Class D student with a documented temper. What is interesting is what Horikita does about it, because it is the first time we see her apply that formidable mind to a problem that is not her own advancement. She investigates, properly patiently, the way you would if you cared about the result. She works out that there might have been a witness, and she finds one. A quiet girl named Eri Sakura, who happened to be photographing nearby, and who is so painfully shy that being asked to stand up and speak is close to the worst thing that could happen to her. Horikita brings her forward anyway, and Sakura, terrified, does it. The hearing convenes, and Horikita, who has prepared, who is right, who has the evidence in hand and the argument assembled, walks into that room and finds her brother sitting at the front of it. Manabu is presiding. Of course he is. He is the student council president, and this is exactly the kind of matter he would oversee, and there is no reason at all for it to be a problem, and it stops her dead. She freezes. The girl with the 3rd highest entrance score in the year, holding a winning case, cannot get a sentence out. She sits there while the argument goes on without her, and very nearly loses the entire thing, because the only person whose opinion has ever mattered to her is watching, and the whole apparatus of her competence simply switches off. Ayanokoji has to snap her out of it. He does, and she recovers, and once she is running again she is genuinely excellent. She argues the injuries. 3 boys against 1, she points out, does not produce that specific pattern of damage, and the story being told does not fit the marks on the bodies. When the Class C teacher, Kazuma Sakagami, offers a compromise, a 2-week suspension for Sudo and everyone goes home, she refuses it. A compromise would leave the accusation standing, and the accusation is false. The matter is settled afterward, and it is settled by a small piece of ruthlessness. She and Ayanokoji corner the 3 Class C boys in a stairwell, and when one of them, Daicha Ishizaki, grabs hold of her, she simply points upward at the security cameras that cover the entire space. Everything they are doing is being recorded. Everything they have just said is being recorded. The complaint is withdrawn. She wins on evidence, on nerve, and on having chosen the ground. And the only moment in the whole affair when she was genuinely helpless was the moment she looked up and saw her brother's face. Somewhere in this stretch, Chabashira takes her aside on the roof and tells her something she does not take seriously enough. If Horikita truly intends to climb to Class A, Chabashira says, she needs to understand what she is sitting next to. Ayanokoji is not ordinary. In a class of broken students, he is, in Chabashira's words, the most broken of all of them, and Horikita has been treating him as a convenient pair of hands. Horikita hears this as an odd remark from a teacher who enjoys being cryptic. She files it nowhere. She has a plan, and the plan does not have room in it for the possibility that the quiet boy beside her is the most dangerous person in the building. And then the summer comes, and with it a ship, and the school stops pretending to be a school at all. They are put aboard a cruise liner and told it is a holiday, which it is not, and while they are still enjoying the fiction, Horikita meets someone, Kakeru Ryuan from Class C, who runs his class by fear and enjoys it. He takes a photograph of her casually without asking and tells her to look forward to what he has planned. It is a small, ugly moment, and it goes nowhere immediately. It is a marker being placed. He has decided she is worth a photograph, and everything he does later is already loaded into that scene. The holiday turns out to be a special examination on an uninhabited island, an elaborate week-long test of survival and strategy, and underneath both, of who can hold a group of people together. Each class must select a leader, in secret. Guessing another class's leader correctly takes points from them. Being guessed correctly is a disaster. Horikita becomes Class D's leader, and the way it happens is worth sitting with. Kushida nominates her, and Kushida's stated reasoning is that nobody would ever expect it to be her, which is perfectly sound tactics. It is also, if you are inclined to notice such things, a way of putting a target on someone. That ambiguity is going to matter enormously later. At this point, it simply looks like a good idea. And Horikita, who has been chosen to carry the one secret that can sink her class, spends the entire examination running a fever. She hides it, naturally she hides it. Telling anyone would mean admitting a limit, and admitting a limit in front of people she has spent months calling worthless is not something she is currently capable of. So she works through it, hot and slowing down, making decisions with a head that is not clear, while the island grinds on around her. Then Yamachi, playing at being funny, throws mud into her hair. It is a stupid little humiliation, the kind of thing that would be forgotten in a day, and it sets off everything that follows. She goes to the waterfall to wash it out, and while she is doing that, the leader's key card, the physical object that proves who she is, leaves her possession. She works out that it was taken, and by whom? Mio Ibuki from Class C, who has been inside Class D's camp this entire time posing as an ally, and who has already burned their survival manual. Horikita goes after her. She finds her, she finds the card on her, and she loses the fight. It is not close. Ibuki is a better fighter, and Horikita is running a fever and has not eaten properly in days, and the whole thing is short and one-sided and ends with Horikita on the ground. And this is where the character actually begins, in the dirt, losing, with a stolen card just out of reach, because what she says to herself in that moment is not about Ibuki and not about the card. She thinks about the fact that if she cannot do this, she is holding Class D back. She thinks about how she looked down her nose at all of them and called them worthless. And she thinks, with the particular clarity that arrives when a person has run out of energy to lie to themselves, that not only is she useless, she is now settling things with violence, which is precisely the behavior she has spent months despising in pseudo. Every belief she brought into that school is in that thought, and every one of them is upside down. Ayanokoji finds her collapsed. She's barely conscious and she will not be moved. She tells him she cannot withdraw, and when he asks why she is really doing any of this, she finally says it. She came to this school to be recognized by her brother. That is all of it. That is the whole engine, laid out flat, by a girl too far gone to dress it up. And then she passes out. He picks her up and carries her out, and he withdraws her from the examination, which is the correct decision, and the one she would never have permitted while awake. Class D wins the island. That is the part she will find hardest to hold. They win it without her, because Ayanokoji quietly made himself leader after she was gone and ran the endgame himself. And then he does something she does not expect and does not want. When it is over, he publicly credits the successful leader guesses to Horikita. He takes the win, which was his, and he hands it to her in front of everybody, so that a class which had every reason to resent the cold girl who insulted them will instead see a leader who delivered. She confronts him about it because of course she does, and she is not grateful in any way she would recognize as gratitude. She wants to know why. He tells her plainly that she needed allies, that she was never going to build a single one on her own, and that he had bought her some. She thanks him, badly, awkwardly, in the stiff and flustered way of someone using a muscle for the first time, and in the course of it she calls him an ally, which is a word she has not applied to another human being since she arrived. It is a very small movement. She has not become warm and she has not become social, and she has not stopped believing that she is going to reach Class A largely through her own excellence. Nothing has been solved. Sudo still resents her. Kushida is still a mystery she has not thought to examine. Her brother has still not looked at her with anything except disappointment, and the fever eventually breaks and leaves her exactly where she was in the bottom class, with a letter she considers an error. But something has shifted underneath, quietly, and she can feel the edge of it without being able to name it. She has been shown, in the least merciful way available, that being right is not the same as being able, and that a person who cannot be helped cannot be saved either. What she has not yet understood is how much further down that particular lesson goes. She thinks she has learned it. She thinks the island was the hard part, the correction, the humbling that comes once and then is over, and that from here she can incorporate the lesson and continue upward more or less as planned. The school has a great deal more to show her than that, and the year ahead is going to take every single thing she still believes about herself, one at a time, and prove it wrong in front of an audience. It begins again on water, which is fitting, because the school seems to like putting them on boats before it takes something away from them. They are aboard a cruise liner once more, and once more the holiday is not a holiday. The students are sorted into groups named after the signs of the zodiac, mixed deliberately so that each group contains people from every class, and inside each group one student has been secretly designated a very important person. The task is to work out who. Identify your own group's hidden figure and you gain. Be identified and you lose. It is a test of reading people, which is precisely the discipline Horikita has spent her life declining to study. She is placed in the dragon group, and the dragon group is not a random assortment. It is, more or less, the room where the class representatives ended up. Yosuke Hirata is there, and Kushida, both from her own class. So is Kohei Katsuragi from Class A, and Ryuji Kanzaki from Class B, and so is Kakeru Ryuin. She goes to work the way she always goes to work, methodically and alone, assembling observations, watching for the inconsistency that gives a person away. And while she is doing that, Ryuin sits down across from her and tells her the answer. He had cracked the entire structure of the examination by the second day, not the second week. The second day, he had already decided that the interesting target was Class A and had aimed himself accordingly, and as for the hidden figure in their own group, he tells her that too. It is Kushida. He is right about all of it, and he tells her to her face, unhurried, enjoying it, because the pleasure for him is not in the information but in the delivery. The class representative of Class D learns the shape of her own examination from the boy who runs Class C, offered as a small gift, the way you might hand a coin to someone in the street. She takes it badly, and she takes it in a very specific way, which is worth noticing. She does not conclude that she needs to get better at reading people. She concludes that the people around her have failed to behave correctly. And there is a quieter thing happening in that group that she does not register at all. Yosuke Hirata is in the dragon group with her, and Hirata is the other pole of Class D, the boy everybody trusts, who holds the room together by genuinely caring what happens to the people in it. He works the way she does not, through warmth and patience and a willingness to be liked, and it is effective, and she has never once considered studying it. She looks at Hirata and sees a pleasant person who is good at pleasant things. She does not see a technique. She is sitting in a group containing the two people in her class who are best at handling human beings, one who does it out of kindness and one who does it out of appetite, and she learns nothing from either of them, because she is busy assembling a table of observations. Ryuin learns everything from everyone. That is the difference between them at this point, and it is not a difference of intelligence. She is probably the better student. He is simply paying attention to a subject she has decided is beneath her. The clearest example is Rokusuke Koenji, a classmate of hers who is beautiful, absurdly capable, and completely uninterested in anything that does not amuse him. Somewhere in the middle of the examination, he decides he is bored and ends his own group's participation early, throwing away whatever result it might have produced. Horikita is furious. And the person she is furious with is Ayano, because Ayano shares a room with Ko Ng and therefore, in her accounting, should have stopped him. Sit with the assumption underneath that for a moment. She believes that a person who is not doing what the class needs is a person who has not been correctly instructed, and that somebody nearby failed to instruct him. It does not occur to her that Ko Ng is not a malfunctioning component, but a human being with his own reasons who would need to be understood, negotiated with, perhaps traded with, before he would move an inch. She wants people to obey. Managing them is a different skill entirely, and she does not yet know that it exists. That gap is about to be measured very publicly. The sports festival arrives and the school splits the 4 classes into 2 teams, and Horikita does what Horikita does. She looks at the problem, calculates the optimal allocation of resources, and produces a plan that is genuinely, provably efficient. Stack the athletic students into the events that pay. Put your strength where it converts. Anyone can see the logic. Satsuki Shinohara objects, so does Kei Karuizawa. Their objection is not that the mathematics is wrong, because it is not wrong. Their objection is that the plan quietly writes off every student who cannot run, and that those students are also in this class, and that a plan which treats a third of the room as ballast is going to cost something that does not show up in the arithmetic. Horikita has no answer for that, because in her framework it is not an argument. It is Kushida who finds the compromise. Let the strong students take the top placings, and let those placings lift the students below them, so that the points are shared across the class rather than concentrated. It is a decent piece of design, and it holds the room together, and it goes to a vote, and it passes 16-13. Horikita accepts it. That is the first real concession she has made to a group of people since she arrived, and she makes it without much grace, but she makes it. Her plan was better on paper. She agrees to the worst plan because the better plan could not carry the people it was for. Somewhere in her, something is learning. And then she does something that has nothing to do with strategy at all. She takes the anchor leg of the relay, the final runner, the one everybody watches, the position that decides how the story of the day gets told. She does not take it because the numbers recommend it. She takes it because the anchor on the opposing team is going to be her brother. Everything about her is in that decision. Given a school-wide event, a class depending on her, and a carefully negotiated plan she had just agreed to, she quietly arranges the day so that at the end of it she will be running directly at Manabu with everyone watching. It is not tactics. It is a letter she is writing to one person. Her actual afternoon goes like this. She wins the girls' 100 meters, outright first, beating Mio Ibuki, the girl who put her on the ground on the island, which must have felt like something being set right. Then the hurdles and she comes third, behind 2 Class C girls from the track club, Yajima and Kinoshita, who are simply faster over that distance than she is. Third is respectable. It is not what she came for. Then the obstacle course, and this is where the day turns. She takes the lead. She is out in front and she is going to win it, and she keeps glancing back over her shoulder at Kinoshita behind her, and the 2 of them tangle and they go down. She gets up and finishes 7th. She is hurt by then and she competes anyway, because stopping is not available to her. In the cavalry battle, she is set upon by 4 Class C horses simultaneously, all of them converging on her at once, and she is pulled down. It is worth pausing on why this particular day breaks her when the island did not quite. On the island she lost while running a fever, which is a reason, and she lost to Spy in a fight nobody had asked her to have. Here there are no excuses available. She is healthy at the start. The events are fair and public and scored. And physical ability was one of the few things about herself she was genuinely proud of, one of the areas where she believed she was simply better than the people around her. The school put that belief on a track, in front of the entire student body, and timed it. Afterwards, Ayano tells her the truth in the flat way he tells her everything. At this moment, he says, she is more useless to the class than Ken Sudo. Sudo, the boy she called worthless in a study group, the boy whose expulsion she paid 50,000 points to prevent while insisting it meant nothing. On this day, in this event, the loud failure with the temper is worth more to Class D than she is, and the arithmetic is not really disputable. And then Ayano tells her what she can actually do about it, which is the more interesting half. Sudo has walked off in a temper, and Sudo is genuinely valuable here, and the single most useful action available to Suzune Horikita right now is to go and bring him back, because she is the only person he will listen to. So she goes. The girl who cannot manage people is sent to manage the least manageable person she knows, and she does it, and he comes back. Afterwards she lets him call her by her first name. It is a tiny thing, 3 syllables, and for her it is enormous because it is the first time she has allowed anyone to close that distance on purpose. She has, in the space of a single afternoon, been beaten physically, told she is worth less than the classmate she despised most, and then repaired something by walking over and talking to a person. The lesson is arriving from every direction at once. And Ryuan has been watching all of it, and has a use for the girl on the ground. The collision in the obstacle course was not an accident. Kinoshita comes forward and accuses Horikita of tripping her deliberately, of sabotaging a competitor to protect her own lead. It is a serious accusation, the kind that follows a student around, and it was engineered from the start. Ryuan set the whole thing up, and now he arrives to explain what it will cost to make it go away. His terms are 1 million private points, and that she kneel to him. The money is an absurd sum, far beyond anything she has. The kneeling is the actual point. Ryuan does not particularly need her money, and he does not particularly need Kinoshita's accusation to succeed. What he wants is to take the proudest person in the year and have her put herself on the floor in front of him, because he enjoys it, and because a person who has done that once is easier to move afterward. And the lever he uses is not the accusation itself, it is where he threatens to take it. He tells her he will bring it to the student council. Which is to say, to her brother. That is what breaks her, not the points, not the humiliation in the abstract, not even the mark on her record. The possibility that Manabu will sit at the front of another room and hear that his sister cheated. She has already frozen solid in front of him once, at Sudo's hearing, unable to speak while a case she had already won slipped away from her. She knows exactly what that room feels like. She will do almost anything not to be in it again. She agrees. And at the end of it she goes through with it. That is the part people sometimes soften when they retell this, and it should not be softened, because the whole meaning of her recovery depends on how far down she went. She kneels. But she does not go down empty-handed, and this is the first genuine flicker of the person she is going to become. Before she submits, she baits him. She gets Ryuan talking, encourages him to enjoy himself, lets him narrate his own cleverness at length, and she records it. It is a good move. It is the move of someone who has finally understood that she is in a game with other people in it, rather than a private examination she is failing. It does not work. Ryuan had been recording as well, and he had a backup, and he is several steps ahead of a girl who has only just started playing. He lets her go in the end, but not because she outplayed him. He releases her after receiving a message from someone he refers to as the mastermind, a person whose identity means nothing to her and everything to the audience. So her first real attempt at counterplay is a loss, but it is the right kind of loss, the kind you take while doing the correct thing badly rather than the wrong thing well. And in the middle of this same stretch, the ground under her shifts in a way she does not fully process at the time. It emerges that Class D has been leaking. Someone inside the room has been working against it. It is Kushida. The girl everyone likes, the girl who learns every name and smooths every edge and proposed the compromise at the sports festival that Horikita accepted. The girl who nominated Horikita as leader on the island, on the reasoning that nobody would ever suspect it, which had sounded at the time like tactical thinking and now looks like something else wearing tactical thinking as a coat. Horikita has spent months carefully sorting her classmates into useful and useless, and the person who has done her the most damage was sitting inside the useful column the entire time, smiling. Her whole method of evaluating people, which is to say looking at their outputs and never at them, has just failed in the most expensive way available. And the failure is worse than a simple misjudgment because Kushida was never hiding. She was operating in plain view, constantly in front of everybody. She proposed the compromise at the sports festival, and the compromise was good, and it did hold the class together. She nominated Horikita as leader on the island, and the reasoning she gave was sound. Nothing Kushida did was obviously wrong at the moment she did it. She simply arranged, again and again, for the outcome to be slightly worse than it needed to be, while every individual step looked helpful. That is a far more unsettling thing to have missed than a lie would have been. A lie can be caught. What Kushida was doing can only be caught by someone who watches a person over time and asks what they seem to want, rather than checking whether each thing they say is true. Horikita has never asked what anyone wants. It has genuinely not occurred to her as a question, because she has always assumed that what people want is obvious and mostly beneath consideration. There is also something in the shape of Kushida's hostility that she cannot make sense of, and will not be able to for a long time. Kushida does not hate her for anything she has done. The dislike arrived early and fully formed, before there was anything to dislike, and it is aimed at Horikita with a specificity that ordinary rivalry does not explain. She is at the bottom now, properly, beaten physically in public, told she is worth less than pseudo, blackmailed onto her knees by Ryuan, betrayed from inside her own class by the friendliest person in it, and underneath all of it, the same steady fact that has been there since her first week, which is that her brother looked at her and told her to leave the school because she did not have what it takes, and has given her no reason since to think he has changed his mind. What happens next is the hinge of her entire story, and it happens without a single clever plan. She stands up in front of the class and apologizes. Not a strategic apology, not a negotiating position. She tells them plainly that her performance at the sports festival was a failure, and then she says the harder part out loud, which is that she has always looked down on people who underperformed. She names her own defect, in front of the people it was aimed at, without being made to. For this character, that is more difficult than any examination the school has set. She's been organized since childhood around the principle that she is correct, and that other people are the problem. Standing in that room and saying otherwise costs her more than the 1,000,000 points ever would have. What makes it land is that she does not soften it on the way out. She does not explain that she had reasons, or that the plan had been mathematically sound, or that she had been under pressure, all of which would have been true, and all of which would have turned an apology into a defense. She says the thing itself and then stops talking. And the class, to its credit, does not humiliate her for it. There is no triumph in that room, no settling of scores, nobody pointing out that they had told her so. They simply absorb it, and the temperature of the class changes slightly, and afterwards people are marginally more willing to do what she asks. That is all. It is not a redemption scene. It is a girl paying down a debt she had spent months accumulating, in the only currency the people she owed would accept. It is worth noticing what she has actually discovered here, because she could not have arrived at it any other way. For her whole life, being wrong was a catastrophe to be avoided, since her entire worth was built on being correct. What she learns standing in front of that class is that admitting a fault is not the moment your standing collapses. It is frequently the moment it begins. The people in that room trust her more after she tells them she looked down on them than they ever did while she was being flawless at them. Her brother, in a very different way, and for reasons she will not understand for a long time yet, has been trying to get her to work this out since the day she arrived. And then, having said it, she goes to work, and it is immediately obvious that something has changed in how she works. The paper shuffle examination is announced, in which classes write questions for each other, and students are sorted into pairs whose results are bound together. Before it begins, there are some preliminary quizzes that appear to be routine. Horikita looks at them and deduces what they actually are. They are not assessments. They exist solely to determine the pairings. Which means the pairings can be steered. She instructs the weakest students in the class to deliberately hand in almost nothing, to write only their names, so that their scores drop to the floor, and the sorting algorithm pairs them with the strongest students in the room instead of with each other. It is exactly the kind of lateral, slightly ruthless insight that Ryuan would have been proud of, and she is right. Chabashira, who does not hand out approval, is visibly impressed. Notice what that plan requires of her, though. It requires her to have thought carefully about which of her classmates are weak, not in order to dismiss them, but in order to protect them. The same information she once used to sort people into worthless and not worthless is now being used to make sure nobody drowns. The data has not changed. The purpose has. She also quietly closes the door on Kushida before Kushida can open it. Knowing there is a traitor in the room, she goes to Chabashira in advance and secures two things. First, sole authority to submit the class's set of questions. Second, an agreement that Chabashira will pretend to accept anyone else's submission. So when Kushida arrives with a substitute set of questions designed to wreck the class from inside, it is accepted with a straight face and quietly discarded. It was dead before it was written. That is a considerable piece of work. It is patient, it is deceptive, it anticipates an opponent's move and neutralizes it without ever letting the opponent know they have been neutralized. And it is done by a girl who 8 months earlier could not get 3 classmates to sit through a study session. And then she does the thing that actually settles it, which is that she goes directly at Kushida and offers her a wager. Kushida chooses the subject and chooses mathematics. If Horikita scores higher, Kushida has to cooperate with her properly from then on. If Horikita loses, she withdraws from the school entirely. That is not a small stake. That is her place at the school, the thing she begged her brother to let her keep, put on a table against a single examination paper. She scores above 98. Kushida scores somewhere around 80. Horikita wins. And in the aftermath, some of what is underneath Kushida finally comes into view. There is a reason the friendliest girl in the class is also the one trying to tear it apart, and it goes back to her middle school, and to a class that collapsed, and to her part in causing it. It is not a full explanation and it does not arrive tidily, but it is the first time Horikita is given the beginning of an answer to the question of what Kushida actually is. There is one more thing running underneath this whole stretch of her year, and she is almost entirely unaware of it, which is its own kind of comment on where she still stands. Ryuen has become convinced that Class D is being steered by somebody, not by its class representative, whom he has already measured and blackmailed and found manageable, but by someone hidden, someone who keeps producing results that the visible members of that class should not be able to produce. He spends a great deal of effort hunting for this person, and his methods are what you would expect from him, and none of that hunt is aimed at Horikita, because he has satisfied himself that she is not the answer. She is not the answer. She is, however, sitting directly beside it, and has been since the first morning in the back row where the seating chart put her. Chabashira told her this outright on the roof, in as many words, that if she wanted Class A she would need to understand the depth of what Ayanokoji actually is. She heard it as a teacher being obscure for the pleasure of it. And all through this year, every time she's been at her worst, the same quiet boy has appeared at the edge of the frame and adjusted something, and she has explained each instance to herself separately and never drawn the line between them. She will get there eventually, not yet. The interesting thing is what Horikita does with the win, because she does not use it to destroy her. She has just secured a binding claim on the person who betrayed her, and the obvious move, the move the girl from the first term would have made without hesitating, is to treat that person as a resolved problem and move on. She does not do that. She keeps trying to bring Kushida in. So the year that was supposed to take everything from her has taken most of it, and left behind something the earlier version of her would not have recognized as valuable at all. She has lost her physical certainty, her belief that being correct is sufficient, her assumption that the people around her are components, and any illusion that she can read a person by looking at their results. What she has gained is smaller and much stranger. She has learned that a plan which the class cannot carry is not a good plan. She has learned that the fastest way to fix a problem is sometimes to walk over and talk to somebody. She has learned to protect the weakest students in the room rather than allocate around them. And she has learned to stand in front of 39 people and say that she was wrong. None of that has made her warm. She's still severe, still difficult, still measuring the distance between herself and a brother who has not softened by a single degree. But she has stopped trying to reach Class A by subtraction, by cutting away everyone who slows her down, and she has begun, very carefully and without ever using the word, to build something instead. And the thing about building is that eventually somebody has to be responsible for it, not clever about it, responsible, which is a different weight altogether, and it is coming for her much sooner than she thinks. The first sign of it is entirely undramatic, which is how you can tell it is real. She starts running study groups, not a study group once as an experiment that collapses when somebody gets insulted, study groups as a permanent feature of the class, scheduled and expected, the kind of thing that is simply there every week whether anyone feels like it or not, and she does not run them alone. She runs them alongside Hirata, who is good with people, and alongside Kushida, who is good with people in a more complicated way, and she uses both of them for exactly what they are good at. Think about who is in that room. The girl who betrayed her, and the boy whose entire method she once regarded as a pleasant irrelevance, working under her, on her initiative, because she has finally understood that a class is not a collection of scores, but a machine with parts that do different things. And the machine works. The class goes through its midterm examinations and its end-of-term examinations, and it does not lose a single student, not one dropout, in a school that expels people for falling below an average. Ken Sudo, specifically, improves substantially, and improves under her tutoring, which is a sentence that would have been ridiculous a year earlier. The boy she called worthless in a failed study group is now passing because of the person who called him that. She also does something that would have been unthinkable to her at any earlier point. She goes to Honami Ichinose, the leader of Class B, and proposes a joint study group between their two classes. Her reasoning is cold and completely sound. For this particular examination, Class B and Class D are not competing with each other, so there is no cost to cooperating and a clear benefit to both. It is not friendship. She's not confused about that. But it is the first time she has ever treated another class as anything other than an obstacle, and it is a piece of strategy that requires her to walk up to a stranger and ask for something, which is a thing she could not previously do. And she keeps going back to Kushida. Kushida refuses her, flatly more than once and not politely. Horikita keeps asking anyway. She does not write her off, does not treat the refusal as a verdict, does not conclude that a person who has said no is a closed file. Given who she was in her first month, that is close to a personality transplant. It is also, and this is the part worth holding on to, not sentimental. She wants Kushida because Kushida is extremely capable, and she has decided that capability is worth being refused over. So that is where she is standing when the school does the cruelest thing it has done to any of them. The examination is announced simply. Every student will cast praise votes and censure votes for their classmates. The student who accumulates the most censure votes will be expelled. That is the whole design. The school is not testing knowledge or endurance or strategy. It is handing 39 teenagers a knife and asking which of them they would like to remove. Horikita's first instinct is decent and useless. She proposes that everyone simply votes identically, 3 praise and 3 censure spread evenly, so that the numbers cancel and nobody is removed. It is the answer a person gives when they want the problem to not be a problem. Chabashira takes it apart in a sentence. A void result does not end the examination. It repeats until it produces a result. The school is not asking whether they would like to do this. It is telling them that they will do it today or next week or the week after, and that the only variable is how much longer everyone has to spend afraid of each other first. Which means somebody in that room is going to be expelled, and somebody is going to have to decide who. And the day before the vote, Suzune Horikita stands up in front of her class and names a person out loud. She nominates Haruki Yamachi. She gives her reasons in the open, which is the harder way to do it. His contribution to the class was, by any measure she can put a number to, negligible. But the decisive point is not his uselessness. It is that Yamachi had been working to have Ayanokoji expelled, and had been using Kushida as the channel to do it, and was doing so on the instruction of Arisu Sakayanagi from Class A. That is the argument that ends him, not that he was dead weight, but that dead weight with a line running to an enemy class is not dead weight at all. It is a door someone else can open. And in the same breath, in front of everybody, she reprimands Kushida for her part in it. Hirata objects, and Hirata's objection is exactly the one you would expect from him, which is that nobody should be expelled, that there has to be another way, that a class which eats one of its own is not a class worth being in. Pseudo protests too. She overrules both of them, and she does it without contempt, which is new. She does not tell Hirata he is naive. She tells him his position cannot be implemented, and that the examination will keep running until it is fed. Yamachi is expelled. 2 other students go the same day from other classes, Manabe and Tatsuka, but Yamachi is the one who was sitting in her room, and Class D goes from that day forward permanently 1 student short. She does not get to feel good about any of it, and she does not try to. 2 details from that stretch tell you how far she has actually traveled. The first is that she did it without asking Ayanokoji. She did not go to him for the plan, did not check her reasoning against his, did not ask him to handle it. He offered her shelter, a place in his own voting arrangement that would have kept her safe regardless of how the numbers fell, and she refused it. The girl whose first strategic act was to buy a boy lunch so she could conscript him now declines to hide behind him on the one day it would have been genuinely comfortable to do so. The second is that afterward, when the class notices that Ayanokoji has somehow accumulated an improbable number of praise votes and starts asking questions about it, she covers for him, quietly without being asked, without ever raising the matter with him. She has begun to understand what is sitting beside her, and her response is not to expose it. It is to stand in front of it. This is the day she becomes a leader, and it should be said plainly that she becomes a leader who is not kind. That is the trade. She did not find a clever third option that saved everybody, because there was not one, and pretending otherwise would have cost her the class rather than one member of it. She chose, out loud with her name attached, and then carried it. There is one thing that day does not resolve, and it is worth being honest that it stays unresolved. Kushida is still in that room. Horikita reprimanded her in front of everybody and then went on working with her, running study groups alongside her, continuing to ask for something she keeps being refused. The hostility between them does not get settled by the vote. It gets deferred. Whatever is actually underneath Kushida, whatever it is that made her arrive already hating a girl who had done nothing to her, is a thread the animated story picks at without ever pulling through. So if you have come to this expecting the scene where that finally breaks open, it is not here yet. Not because it does not exist, but because it sits just past where the animation has reached, and it would be a poor sort of storytelling to hand you a moment the story has not given you. What the animation shows is a girl who keeps extending a hand to someone who keeps refusing to take it, and who does not stop, and who does not seem to regard the refusals as a reason to stop. which is, in its quiet way, the more interesting version anyway. The rest of that year is gentler with her, which she has earned. In the event selection examination against Class A, Ayanokoji puts her forward for the chess match against Masayoshi Hashimoto. She had learned chess roughly a week earlier. Ayanokoji taught her, and against a properly prepared opponent, she builds an early position strong enough that Sakai Inagi, watching her own side start to slide, has to step in personally to salvage it. There is also a hand on the scale that Horikita cannot see, a man named Tsukishiro feeding her a move that is not the move she should play. She loses, and the loss reads as competence, which is the exact inverse of the sports festival. A year earlier she was beaten at the thing she was proudest of, in public, with no excuse available. Here she is beaten at a game she had known for a week, by an opponent who needed help, and everybody watching understands what that means. Then she cuts her hair. She goes short, and the reason is not aesthetic. Her brother had always said he preferred it long, and she had worn it long for years without ever deciding to, the way you keep a habit that was installed rather than chosen. Cutting it is her stepping out from under a shadow she's been standing in since childhood, and she does it before he graduates, while it still counts as a statement he can see. And then Manabu graduates, and the whole thing finally opens. He tells her the truth he has been sitting on since her first week, that he pushed her away deliberately, that when he looked at his younger sister, he saw what he calls an unpolished diamond, and that what he wanted was not for her to catch up to him but to surpass him, and that the thing he could not forgive, the thing that made him tell her to leave the school, was not her failure, it was that she had settled. She had organized her whole life around becoming a smaller copy of him, and had accepted in advance that a copy is all she would ever be, and he found that unbearable. He admits he lied about her hair. He had never preferred it long. He had used it as a gauge, a simple visible signal of whether she was still living to meet his expectations or had finally started living to meet her own. Every morning she tied it back. She was telling him she had not started yet. Then he hugs her and tells her he wants to see what she becomes. She tells him she is going to make her own path. And then immediately afterward, she's shown crying and insisting that she wants to walk alone, which is the last time the old Horikita is fully visible, because she has just been told that she was never inferior, that the person she measured herself against had been trying to make her stop measuring, and that years of cold treatment were a method rather than a judgment. That is a great deal to be handed at once, and the version of her that arrived at this school does not have anywhere to put it. She also, in the same stretch, ends the alliance with Ichinose, on the grounds that from the following year their classes will be enemies. It is a cold decision made without cruelty, which is a distinction she could not have drawn a year earlier. And she takes a bet with Ayanokoji, whose forfeit turns out to be that she must join the student council. The girl who refused every club, every friendship, and every affiliation on principle ends up seated on the school's central body because she lost a wager to the boy in the next chair. She comes back for her second year with short hair. Class 2D now has 2 representatives, and she is one of them, alongside Hirata. The pairing is sensible, since between them they cover both halves of what leading that room requires, but everyone at the school, when they refer to it, calls it Horikita's class. The school has also changed how it measures them. The old system is replaced by something called overall abilities, which grades every student across 4 separate scales: academic ability, physical ability, adaptability, and social contribution, and publishes the result. What unsettles her about it is precise and revealing. It grades individuals. She spent her first year learning painfully that she was part of something, and the school has responded by putting every single person's worth back on public display, one name at a time. Her own readings are worth sitting with, because they describe her more honestly than any scene could. Her academic ability comes in at an A-, at 82, which is roughly where you would expect for a girl who placed 3rd in the year on the entrance examination and has not stopped working since. Her physical ability reads a B at 71, respectable, not exceptional, a number that would have wounded her deeply in her first year, when she still believed that her body was one of the things that made her better than the people around her, and which by now she has presumably made peace with, because she has been beaten enough times to know what it means. Her adaptability sits at a C at 42, and that is the honest one. It is the scale that asks how well a person handles a situation that is not the situation they prepared for, and it is the lowest thing on her card by a wide margin. She is still, at heart, someone who builds a plan and expects the world to hold still for it. She has learned to accept a worse plan that the class can carry. She has not learned to improvise, and the school can see it. And her social contribution reads a B+ at 80. Her overall grade comes out a B at 67. There is something almost funny about a school that hands a teenager a printed card listing exactly which parts of her are still unfinished, and something entirely characteristic about the fact that she does not argue with it. The student council seat turns out to matter more than a lost bet should. Miyabi Nagumo is the president now, and Nagumo is not her brother. Manabu ran the council as a kind of principled machine. Nagumo runs it as a personal instrument, openly, with a taste for pressure and a habit of testing people to see what they will do when squeezed. Sitting on that body puts Horikita in a room with the most powerful student in the school on a regular basis, watching how power actually gets used by someone who enjoys using it. She spent her first year believing that reaching the top was a matter of being good enough. The council is where she gets to watch what the top is actually made of. Then comes the first real examination of her second year, in which students are paired and their fates bound together, and here she does something she has never done before. She states her objectives out loud, in advance, and commits to them. There are 3. Nobody in her class is to be expelled. The class is to finish 3rd or better, and she will not buy partners with private points. Ayanokoji later confirms that every one of the 3 was correct. Look at what those 3 objectives actually are. The first is the doctrine of a leader who has watched a classmate expelled and decided never again. The second is ambition, kept realistic. The third is a rule about method, a refusal to solve a people problem by throwing money at it, which is exactly what the girl from the first year would have done without hesitating if she had been able to afford it. She pursues an alliance with the incoming first years through a student named Tsubasa Nanase, and she pursues it on the basis of trust rather than transaction. She is blocked by Kazuomi Hosen, who is large and violent and enjoys being both, and she faces him down without giving ground. And then she solves her hardest problem in a way that is genuinely elegant. She needs pseudo-partnered well, and she arranges for Ichika Amasawa to take him by leveraging the one thing about pseudo that is objectively excellent, which is his physical rating. She manages the whole thing carefully, including coaching Ayanokoji through an earpiece while he cooks. Afterwards, Ayanokoji tells her something she has been working toward since her first month without knowing what it would look like. Her strategy is now the same shape as the strategies of the other 3 class leaders. Not better yet, the same shape. She has arrived in the conversation. She joins the student council under Miyabi Nagumo, honoring the bet. And then the animated story gives her its last and best examination, on the same kind of island where she once collapsed with a fever and a stolen keycard. The examination runs for days and ranks every student individually, and Horikita walks up to the one classmate no leader has ever been able to move and makes him an offer. Rokusuke Koenji, the boy who ended his own group's examination out of boredom in her first year, the one she was furious about, the one she expected somebody to simply instruct into compliance. She does not try to instruct him now, she trades with him. If he takes first place overall, she will grant him permanent freedom to act exactly as selfishly as he likes for the rest of their time at the school. If he fails, he cooperates with the class from then on. Koenji takes first place with 327 points, edging out Nagumo's third-year group on 325. So she loses the bet, and she pays it. She has surrendered any future claim on the most capable individual in her class. And she got a class-saving result out of a person she once would have written off in a sentence. That is her entire arc executed as a piece of strategy. The girl who could not get 3 boys to sit through a study session found the one currency that moved the immovable one and paid it. There is a moment on that island, though, that matters more than the points. Amasawa confronts her about Ayanokoji, and Horikita answers plainly. She says he is the first friend she has been able to make. She says she intends to keep trying to understand him all the way through to graduation. Consider the distance in that sentence. Her opening position in her first week was that friends drag you down. Her closing position, at the end of everything the animation has shown us, is that she has won, that it took her 2 years, and that she is not finished with him. And then she proves it in the only way this school ever accepts as proof, which is by paying for it. Believing that Ayanokoji is in danger, she deliberately drops her own ranking and moves to reach him, accepting a real risk of expulsion to get to a place on the map where she thinks he is. The girl who once calculated every action against her own ascent burns her safety margin for one person. She fights alongside Mio Ibuki, of all people, against Amasawa at the end. Ibuki, who beat her in the dirt on the first island while she was running a fever, they are on the same side now. And she loses again, Amasawa, injured and exhausted, is still stronger than she is. But the loss is not the same loss. On the first island she was fighting for her own pride and her own record, alone, hiding a fever because admitting weakness was unbearable. Here she is fighting alongside someone for someone, and the thing she is protecting is not her own standing. When it is over, 5 students are expelled, and all 5 are third years from Class A. Not one first year or second year is removed. Her first objective, the one she stated out loud before any of it began, holds. Class 2D gains 288 class points, finishing on 571, and climbs from the bottom rank to third, passing Ryuan's class on the way, with Ichinose's class now only barely ahead. The class of defective students is no longer at the bottom. And there is one number that says it better than any of the others. In the school's own measurements, the scale called social contribution is the one that asks, in effect, whether a person can work alongside other people at all. It is the precise quality the school looked at when it sorted a girl with the third highest entrance score in her year into the bottom class. By her second year, hers reads B+ at 80. There is a figure that circulates for her first year, from a promotional card rather than from anything shown inside the story, and the school's grading system did not formally exist in universe back then, so it is worth treating gently rather than quoting as a school record. But it puts her first year social contribution at a D at 34. Whether or not that exact number is canon, the shape of it is simply true, and you can watch it happen across 2 years without needing anyone to score it. The defect the school identified on day 1 was real. She had it. And she is the only one of the 4 class leaders who took the thing that was wrong with her and did the slow, unglamorous, frequently humiliating work of fixing it. The others were already what they are. Ichinose was always loved. Sakayanagi was always right. Ryuan was always exactly as willing to hurt people as he needed to be. They arrived complete. Horikita arrived wrong and stayed and changed. It is worth being fair to the other 3, because none of them are simple. Ichinose's warmth is genuine, and it is also the thing that can be used against her, since a leader held up by affection has very little defense when the affection is attacked. Sakayanagi's certainty is real and mostly justified, and it means she has never had to learn what to do on a day when she is wrong. Ryuan's willingness to break people gets results quickly and produces a class that obeys him rather than one that believes anything, which is a structure that works right up until the moment he is not standing over it. Each of them, in other words, leads out of a strength they were born with, and a strength you were born with is a strength you have never had to examine. Horikita is the only one of the 4 who had to build the thing she leads with, from nothing, out of the exact material the school had marked as her defect. She's not the strongest leader in the year. She may not finish the strongest, but she is the only one who has demonstrated that she can take an accurate criticism of herself, sit with it for a year and a half, and come out the other side different. That is a rarer ability than being brilliant, and the school, in its cold and roundabout way, has been trying to teach exactly that to every student in the building since the opening ceremony. Most of them never worked out what the lesson was. She was told hers directly, in the rain in her first month, by a boy who asked whether her coldness was the reason she had been sorted where she was. She denied it, and then she spent 2 years answering it properly. So that is where the story leaves her, for now. Short hair, a seat on the student council she took because she lost a bet, a class that has climbed from last to third, with a stated rule that none of them are to be lost, a working relationship with people she once described as worthless, including a boy she once paid 50,000 points to keep while insisting it meant nothing at all. A brother gone from the school, who told her at the end that he had spent years being cruel to her because he thought she was worth more than she believed, and one friend, acquired slowly in the back row because of where the chairs happened to be. She has not reached Class A. That was always the goal she said out loud, and it is not finished, and there is a great deal of school left. But somewhere between a girl, standing in the rain being asked whether her coldness was the reason she was sorted into the bottom class, and a young woman throwing away her own ranking on an island because she thought someone needed her, the answer to that question quietly stopped being true. And that is probably the gentlest place to leave her, not at the top of anything, just further along than she was, in a quiet room with people around her she would have walked past a year ago, still difficult, still severe, still measuring, but no longer alone in the back row. Sleep well.